versus Zerg here, which is going for a gateway and getting an expand early on, with a focus on making sure my pylons are on the right spot. Managing Chrono Boost. Honestly, with Chrono Boost, it's okay to just keep it on the Nexus. It's not a big deal. It's actually a lot worse if you forget to move your Chrono Boost from somewhere back to the Nexus rather. But against Zerg, my first pylon, I'm actually going to go for the wall off here. Because remember, the most important part, there are two important things to remember about pylons in Legacy of the Void. One is Pylon Overcharge, which means early on with a Mothership Core, you can overcharge your pylons for spot defense against Zerglings or Roaches or any sort of attack. And the second thing is Super Pylons. Remember that a pylon that is within range of a Warp Gate or a Nexus, it doesn't matter which one, but in range of a Warp Gate or a Nexus, takes 5 seconds to warp in. Whereas a pylon that is not connected to a Warp Gate or a Nexus, it's not within the radius. You see, this will be a Warp Gate. But if it's not within the radius of the pylon, it takes 16 seconds to warp in at that pylon, which is a long time. So you got to do your best to keep warp gates and nexi near to your pylons and be warping in on those. Of course, there's a different graphical animation on it as well to think about. But I'm going to be getting these pylons towards the front. We got our gateway started. I'm getting another pylon so that way I can wall off with a single zealot. I'm not going for a super early expansion here, and honestly, I should have scouted off the gateway, but you can scout pretty much anytime early as long as you have the wall. He does have a drone in the back here, which we have to remember early on. That could be concerning if he does go for an early... well, he could go for a hatchery, I guess. I'm going to scout and see if he made a hatchery down here. Just in case. It's very unlikely, but... Oh, okay. He didn't make a hatchery based on the fact the drone is still not a hatchery here. But I'm going to go down and take my expansion now. Before even getting a second gas. As long as I get a pylon up there. Okay, we see he's expanding. So no super early pool with speedlings or anything crazy like that. Though he does have the gas. You see he's mined almost 100 gas here. You start at 2,000. He has just enough for speed. So we can start that immediately. Immediately as... his spawning pool finishes after that hatchery. Alright, I'm going to get a pylon on the low ground. This is going to be to start the wall off here, and it's in range of the Nexus, which will make it a super pylon. And I'm going to start my warp gate as well. We're getting the Mothership Core, and now's the time to get another gas. I'm going to do the most basic build, which is opening up with a couple extra gateways and a robotics facility. The robotics facility, of course, you can make observers. Doing a little bit of stutter step micro to kill that drone there, nothing too fancy. But observers and immortals early on alongside a warp prism, it's just the most utility with the least investment of APM or multitasking or something. I'm not saying you can't multitask or you can't have high APM, but it's better to just focus on very basic builds early on. It makes it a little bit easier to progress into doing other builds if you have an understanding of how to use your tech. But we'll get that robotics facility. I don't want to make it under the Overlord because then it becomes very obvious what I'm doing. I have the Zealot on hold position here. You just press the H button. You can see it's on hold position if you select it down in the command card. And get a Stalker to drive out this Overlord. I'm going to scout one more time with a probe. Get an idea of what he's up to. See if there's a big attack coming in. I also need to get... So I'm going to get a pylon at the back. Sure, I'm not that close to a supply block, but I need to have something in position to see if he's coming through these back rocks. I could take them down early on. I don't think that I need to, but it's something I could do. You got to be aware of if there's collapsible rocks to create obstacles and stuff like that. But right now, I'm just waiting for my warp gate to finish. I'm going to get an observer first. I'm going to get behind... Well, I could actually overcharge a pylon. I didn't even think about that, to be honest. But we see he has a lair. I don't know if he's finished speed. He has a secondary gas, and he's upgrading from an evolution chamber. So that means he's not invested in a super early attack, and he could be going for just a lair tech attack as opposed to some sort of early pressure. But I'm going to get an observer. We're going to have warp gate, and I'm going to start warping in with a couple sentries early on. It's good to have the ability to force field. I'm going to have my observer to see what kind of lair tech he decides to get. Now, he could be upgrading anything from that Evo Chamber, whether it's armor for roaches and lings, or attack for roaches or lings. Remember, Zerg upgrades are split between melee and ranged upgrades, so depending on what unit he picks, he's going to be upgrading that. But I should just be starting my upgrades in general, usually by 5 or 6 minutes as Protoss against Zerg is a good timing to have at least +1 on the way. You want to get the ball rolling on those as quickly as possible. I'm going to add a couple more gateways on. We're going to get him in a semi-wall location at the back here. Not a full wall, but once I see what he's doing, and if he has a third base, I might think about another base. But I'm just starting an Immortal here. Immortals are good, just basic defense. But if he does have a Spire on the way, that's the only time they're not going to be especially useful. Against pretty much anything else, they will be. We see a Roach Warren. I'm looking around. We see a Hydralisk Den back there. Got to be careful of the Spore Crawler. I have this Observer hotkeyed on 3, and he actually took down the rocks, and he snuck in here. So I need to move my probes back. I don't have a pylon at the back of my mineral line, which is something you should have, to be honest, in order to deal with any of this. But we can take the probes back, and we'll go back to mining gas. I'm using that shift click to split off units to get into gas. But right now we see he has a third base, and he doesn't have any real threat of super early attack. I can go for, against Hydralisks and Roaches, I'm going to start going for Disruptors. Disruptors are that strong anti-ground unit that big balls of units like Roaches, especially ranged units, they're very good against. So what I want to do is get a Robotics Bay over here. I'm going to have... I mean, I could go for an attack. I think I'm going to move out with a light attack right here, because remember, you have the ability to recall with only 50 energy. Just make sure that Mothership Core is hotkeyed separately. But what I want to do at this timing, like right after he did that little bit of pressure, I just want to attack and see if he got too greedy. I'm going to go towards the third base here, and what this will do is put pressure on him. If he doesn't make units, I have a good chance to do damage. And if he does make units, then he's not making drones, and my economy is looking a little bit better off compared to his. I'm getting my third base because I saw he had a third, and he was teching up. But we'll take down these rocks, and pretty much what I'm looking to do is force out units right now. I have the Warp Prism as well. Nothing too crazy here. But we're getting some units at home as well. I have a Chrono Boost on the Robotics Facility because I'm probably going to be using it to produce for a while. I have no intention of trying to kill him with this attack, by the way. We're setting the rally point of the probes at the third base. But this is just to put a little bit of pressure on, see what he has, maybe snipe this base if possible. I can set some force fields out here, but I'm going to just attack the base. These force fields will keep him from attacking me, and with the Immortals I'm able to take the base, and we can recall to my third as well, which is really nice. I have observers out on the map to see what he's up to. I'm going to have my Disruptors hotkeyed on 3. It's a specialty unit. You do not want to have your Disruptors hotkeyed with the rest of your army. That's pretty important. That's pretty important because they are units that die pretty easily, and once you use your Disruptor shots, of course, remember, Disruptors work on a cooldown. They have their ability, they shoot out their death ball, and then they're pretty much useless for the next 20 seconds or so. So it's important to keep them at the back of your army so they don't die in those 20 seconds when they can't really do anything. But we've got the Disruptors on the way. I'm going to send out a Hallucinated Phoenix just to get an idea of where his army is and if he's attacking. But right now, getting the Twilight Council, I'm adding on some... Oh, I already have a Twilight Council, but we're adding... I can add on Blink. There's an attack at the front here. I'm actually going to recall my army over there in order to deal with this. Sure, it's going to be on top of this, but with a couple Disruptor hits as well, we're going to be able to do a lot of damage. And having the Mothership Core with the army makes it very mobile like that. Using Guardian Shield, but if he wants to attack into this, I can throw a couple force fields up and kill some more units off. But the Disruptors themselves take the big chunk out of the units. It takes away the strength of his army, because otherwise I don't have splash damage, but if you wipe out like a third of the units in the first volley, then usually you should be able to overwhelm them. Did I finish 2 Twilight Councils? Yes, I did. Just in case, right? But right now I'm just building up a solid death ball army, I guess you could say. Honestly, I could probably attack right here. I'm bringing the Warp Prism as well. This Warp Prism will be to reinforce, and I'll just do an attack at the front. I have a third Disruptor, and I just want to be continually producing here. I am supply blocked, but I should have enough army supply in order to attack. There's no reason not to get something like a Dark Shrine and add some more gateways on. Like, I just want to be able to spend my money pretty much. I've got this Observer to see what's happening, and, well, we can catch this army out here. I haven't been doing anything crazy but spending my money. I eventually got the Disruptors out. Got to make sure they're with the army, but I have them hotkeyed separately, remember. That's very important. Now we can just warp in. Stalkers are a good choice here because they stay out of range of the disruptor shots. They do extra damage to armored. And, well, that's all you really need. And they're good to, they grow in strength because they're ranged units. Whereas things like Zealots sometimes aren't that useful in location. Like, oh, he has lurkers. Gotta make sure we bring the observer here. He has a couple lurkers involved, so we gotta be very careful that I don't get too close. He has a Spire as well, but I'm going to have Blink Stalkers in just a moment. Now you see he comes down the ramp, but we can send out the Disruptor hits and get some big damage on him. And kill a lot of Hydralisks. Just a few Disruptors do very good damage. Got to be careful with this Observer. But there you go. He has one Lurker here, but nothing too crazy. Notice how much money I'm banking here? It's important to just be consistently warping in on cooldown. That's why I added some extra gateways. He has a couple mutas, but nothing too crazy here. Trying to get him to attack the mothership core, but... Alright. I'll have another warping in a moment to deal with this, but he just doesn't have enough army supply. The Disruptors did their job of chunking up the Hydras there, which is pretty much what they're looking to do in most situations. Can Photon Overcharge on the other side. And now we just have an army he can't deal with. If I had gone head-on into Lurker Hydra, I might have lost without the Disruptors, but once you have the Disruptors, you can pretty much cut off any choke point. If he tries to come down a ramp, he's going to have a real bad day. One thing I did make a pretty big mistake on was not getting upgrades consistently and stuff like that. But just spending your money is the most important thing. If you're consistently expanding around the time they're expanding, and then spending your money, you should almost always have a larger army supply than someone who doesn't do it so consistently. And the biggest mistake at the lowest levels, or the lower levels, not the lowest levels, is just focusing too much on what units you're making instead of how many. How many is way more important there. And I was just able to build a ton of Stalkers. I didn't even use my Blink. Like, I had Blink, but there's no reason to do fancy micro. As I'm able to just walk over once I have that army supply. He actually had more APM than me that game. I was just spending mine a little bit more wisely. I had a lot of... Honestly, you should really be focusing on keeping that under 1,000 in average unspent resources. I did pretty well in the supply block count, and you just see the army value of consistently spending. Nothing crazy, no fancy micro, or even like a Warp Prism drop. Just building an army is all you really need. But thank you guys for watching. Make sure to check out my other guides as well. Leave feedback in the comments, and I'll see you on the other side. And scene.